Hi, my name is Johanna Colon, and I am an eighth grade social studies, ELL, and MLL virtual content specialist. Today, we will be focusing on this teacher-facing video that is on Unit 3, Day 5, and the title of this lesson is Native American Resistance, with a focus question of how did Manifest Destiny affect the growth of the nation? And while we're focusing on this, we need to make sure that the students understand resistance, which is something that we have to keep connecting with the students, what resistance means, which they should have prior knowledge from lesson 3 and lesson 4 as you continue to touch upon it. And in terms of how did Manifest Destiny affect the growth of the nation, Manifest Destiny is a term that should have been unpacked for lesson 4 as I previewed in the interactive Jamboard glossary for day 4. And the lesson objective remains the same, where the students have to analyze and annotate primary source documents to identify the relationship between the United States and Native nations. So for example, as we continue, we're up to day 2 here, right? So some of basically the students are going to be working independently, and they're supposed to be reviewing and annotating, right? And as you annotate with your students, you want to make sure that it is meaningful, relevant, and purposeful. And you want to make sure that it really connects to what the objective wants, which is to analyze the relationship between the United States and Native nations, right? So the reading that we're going to focus is on independent work for document number 4. There's many different ways that you can do this. You can have students preview the text in their home language, which is accessible to them. If you go on Teach Hub, their student workbooks are actually available in many different home languages. And really making use of their home languages is pivotal to their understanding of the content and what's going on in your classroom. So that's number 1. And again, as you preview the text, you want to make sure that maybe they read it beforehand, right? If they read it beforehand, then that would mean that they can have access to the English version in the class the next day. So for example, in this case, it's document 4, and here you have the Spanish translation, which they would read beforehand, right? They get the historical context, and then they get the reading itself, and the questions are also translated, which would help your students really go through this document and access it the way that they should. So another thing that you want to make sure that you do is while you're previewing this text in the classroom, you can highlight the cognates. So cognates are words that look similar, and they tend to occur especially with Romance languages. For example, if we look at this English version of the text here, let me just move here. We go to document 4 on page 29 of the student workbooks. We see here they're talking about something, right? And what do you want to highlight with your students? Remember, you want to annotate purposefully, and you want to annotate for what is going on during this time period, and of course, the relationship between Native Americans and the United States. So some of the words here that I definitely highlighted are fighting and killed, right? Students might know what fighting is, right? Killed. It's still relevant because these fighting and killed, as we would have identified in the interactive Jamboard glossary, would be a negative relationship, right? That's why I picked that image, because it's something that the students would definitely encounter in the text, right? Fighting or killed. And when they see these two highlighted here, they can look at it in their Spanish translation in their or any home language translation side by side during the class period. Fighting, killed, what is fighting? So if we take a look at one of the translations, right? Fighting would be fighting would be here. If we look here, cansado de luchar, han matado. So fighting, luchar, o pelear. You see, we have to also be mindful of the translation. Sometimes students might not even know the words in their own languages. So I think it's important to try to find synonyms in their language as well, right? Which is of course easy to do so in of course you can use Google Translate. So let's go back to Google Chrome. Students have access. The beauty of um, the Department of Education is that they have provided students with devices, right? So they might have an access to certain devices. So if we want to translate from English to Spanish, so to speak, we can say, okay, so Ms. Colon highlighted fighting. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. And in this case, we would get the translation. And here it says luchar. So lucha, and it even has, right, it has different ways of saying, right, la pelea, la lucha, el combate, and it has some visuals for the students, which is perfect for English language learners or multi-language learners because they're really able to access the content, right? So again, really just making focus of those words, right? Annotating with a purpose. Our purpose, as the objective highlights, is to identify the relationship. Another thing that you want to make sure is you unpack the historical context. What is happening during this time period where it says here that Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce led his people in an attempt to resist the takeover of their lands in the Oregon Territory by white settlers. You want to make sure that you also connect to the Sitting Bull quote because it is something that you're going to check for understanding at the end. And this quote references being promised something and not getting it. Okay, so the students have to be able to make that connection, especially because they have this graphic organizer, which is also available to them in their home languages. And this should really benefit your ELs in the classroom, bolding, annotating with a purpose, showing them and modeling how to annotate, right? Although this is independent work, maybe you want to check in with the student and make sure that they are on the right path. You want to model it further, right? Especially depending on what level your ELs are.